Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Back again to our work in hard times. In the previous video in chapter 10, we have discussed the character of Stephen because the title of the chapter was Stephen Blackpool. Actually, I missed to mention something related to his name. Stephen is a kind of a Christian name, and Blackpool, as you see, is supposed to be something related to the Industrial Revolution. Black means black, and Paul is buq'a, which means buq'a sawda. So the writer tries to make a kind of ironic situation for the life of Stephen by giving him a Christian name and an industrial reference. So Stephen's life is portrayed as a kind of a black pool, his life, because he kept repeating life as a model for him because of his suffering since he was a child. With this note, we came to conclude chapter 10, and of course chapter 11 is supposed to be a kind of continuation for chapter 10. No way out from the early beginning of the chapter. No way out. There is no way out of this situation. So we understand that as far as we've been talking about Stephen's life in chapter 10, so chapter 11 shows us that there is no hope for Stephen to get a better life from the one he's living now. So this is what we are expecting to read and understand in chapter 11. As you see, some kind of description in which the writer starts his chapter. The writer never fails to highlight the importance of the Industrial Revolution and how it is influencing or affecting the life of people at the Victorian time. So look how he describes the situation. The day grew strong and showed itself outside, even against the flaming lights within. The lights were turned out and the work went on, which refers to the beginning of daytime. The rain fell, and the smoke serpents, submissive to the curse of all that trailed themselves upon the earth. This is the beginning of the factories to work from the early morning. In the waste yard outside, the steam from the escape pipe, anabib takhrij al-bukhar, the litter of barrels, the litter يعني البقايا والأشياء, wastes of barrels and old iron, the shining heaps, الكومات اللامعة, الأكوام اللامعة of coals, the ashes everywhere were shrouded in a veil of mist and rain. This is how we are to visualize, to imagine the kind of life that those people had at that time, where we have factories working on with that noise of the engines. We have serpents of smoke covering the atmosphere outside, tarnishing the environment. We have large heaps of coal, because coal used to be the fuel of these engines. And we have also the litters, al-baqaya ashes spread everywhere in the place. So it's a kind of a gloomy situation. This is how we are expected to visualize and imagine this scene. So this is where those people lived, and this is their life for more than a century after the advent of the Industrial Revolution. So the writer tries to attract our attention, and he tries to push us to sympathize, and we do, of course, sympathize with those people. The work went on until the noon bell rang. Bell rang or the ringing of the bell is normally associated with a gloomy setting. I think you dealt with this, or you're gonna deal with it in some Victorian poems, especially in Thomas Gray's poem, An Elegy in the Churchyard, or something like that. Normally, the bell in Christian churches rings, declaring the death of somebody. This is a kind of routine for Christians. So when the church bell rings, it gives us a bad news. So the writer borrows this kind of event and associates it with the lives of the workers, which he means that those workers die every day. They die in the morning and they die in the evening. Because of their bad life. More clattering upon the pavements, the looms. Clattering يعني movement، شلون شخص تعبان ويمشي هيجي يتأرجح. The pavement, the looms، أدوات الحياكة، the wheels, the hands, all out of gear for an hour. كلهم في استراحة for an hour. Stephen came out of the hot mill into the damp wind and cold wet streets, haggard and worn. He turned from his own class and his own quarter. In his attempt to visit Mr. Bounderby, he has something to discuss with Mr. Bounderby. Mr. Bounderby was at his lunch, so Stephen had expected. Would his servant say that one of the hands begged leave to speak to him? Message in return requiring name of such hand, Stephen Blackpool. So Stephen went to Bounderby and asked his servant to meet Bounderby, and the message came back. There was nothing troublesome against Stephen Blackpool. Yes, he might come in. Here, factory owners, mill owners, the people of factories, the owners of the factories, did not accept or do not accept to meet everybody unless this somebody is not a kind of a troublesome person, because there are some workers who incite troubles and the problems for other workers or for the factory owners, such as asking for a wage raise, for example, or for decreasing the hours of work, or for some luxurious points that factory owners see them as luxurious. So here comes Stephen and he meets Bounderby. Now, Stephen, said Bounderby, what's the matter with you? What is your problem? Why you want to meet me? Now you know, said Bounderby, taking some share, we have never had any difficulty with you, and you have never been one of the unreasonable ones. You don't expect... this is important, actually. It's a kind of offense, رسالة Stephen. Look, you don't expect to be set up in a coach and 6. ما تتوقع أن نقعدك في coach عربة, and to be fed on turtle soup, ونغذيك بحساء السلاحف. It seems to be something important in England at that time. And venison, لحم الغزال, with a gold spoon, بملعقة من ذهب, as a good many of them do. So he is mocking, actually, يسخر من ستيفن, and telling him this kind of speech. ما تريد ندللك وين قاعدك هيجي مكان ونوكلك لحم غزال ونطعمك بملعقة من ذهب You are a worker and you are supposed to do your work. That's all why you are here. Mr. Bounderby always represented this to be the sole immediate and direct object of any hand who was not entirely satisfied. فكان هذا شعار Mr. Bounderby لأny worker who is not satisfied with his own work. No, sir, sure, I have not come for not to other kind. أنا ما جيت على هاي الموضوع على موضوع العمل. I came for another issue. Mr. Bounderby, agreeably surprised, Yani he was expecting Stephen to talk about issues related to the working class. For example, as I said earlier, the working time, work hours, for example, wage or salary raise, for example, and these things. But Stephen came for another issue. So very well, let me hear what it is all about. Stephen happened to glance towards Mrs. Sparsit. I can go, Mr. Bounderby, if you wish it. He just by chance looked at Sparsit, and Bounderby translated this look as Stephen wants Sparsit to leave in order to have some privacy, and he started discussing how he considers Mrs. Sparsit. The same as he mentioned to Sissy in previous chapters when he mocked and contempted Sissy for not bowing to Mrs. Sparsit. Now you know this good lady is a born lady, a high lady. You are not to suppose because she keeps my house for me that she hasn't been very high up the tree, up at the top of the tree. So this kind of description is normally repeated by Stephen whenever he has, by Bounderby whenever he has a chance actually. So he tries to show that Mrs. Sparsit a very high and high class lady, and she keeps his house, and this is a kind of something that he is proud of. He is a businessman, and he has a very high lady that keeps his house. So this is something that he is bragging about. Very well, said Bounderby, pushing away his plate. Here. Sir, I hope I never had naught to say not fitting for a born lady 2 years since I were born myself. Look at the language, as I said in the previous chapter. Stephen's language is broken, and it is not grammatical in reference to his low education, and he is even unable to speak to evoke that kind of simplicity of life, Stephen's life. I have come, Stephen began, to ask you your advice. I need it overmuch. I were married on Easter Monday 19 year since long and 3. She were a young lass, his wife, a pretty enough, with good accounts of herself. Well, she went bad soon, not along of me. God knows means God knows I were not unkind husband to her. This paragraph is linked, or we can link it with the last 3 paragraphs in the previous chapter, where he came to his house and he was stumbled and met and found that a lady is sleeping in his room, drunk, and she is unable to talk, unable to stand or sit herself, who seems to be his wife. So he seems to be trying to get rid of this lady, and he wants to an advisor from Bounderby how to get rid of this wife. I have heard all this before, said Bounderby. She took to drinking, left off working, stopped working, sold the furniture, باعت الأثاث مال البيت, pawned the clothes, and played old gooseberry. I were patient with her. The more fool you, I think, said Bounderby in confidence. I were very patient with her. I tried to warn her from it over and over again. I tried this, I tried that, I tried the other. I have gone home many times and found all vanished as I had in the world, and her without a sense left to bless herself. So this is the case of Stephen. He suffers with his wife. His wife is problematic. She is drinking. She quit from work, and she seems to be a burden for him. She used to sell his furniture, his clothes, in order to buy liquor maybe, or to enjoy herself. So she started to be a burden to him, and he no more can take this life with her. So he came for advice to get rid of his wife. So now he explains his situation with this lady. From bad to worse, from worse to worsen. She left me, she disgraced herself everywhere, bitter and bad. She come back, she come back, she come back. So whenever she leaves, after a while she comes back. And this highlights how long is that era or period, because he might push her away, and then she takes sometimes, and then she returns. What could I do to hinder her? How can I stop her? I have walked the streets night long, ever before ever. I had gone home, the bringing mind to fling myself over and have no more. I have borne that much, that I were old when I were young. This is one of the reasons that made him grow older than the way he looks, than the way he is. Actually, he seems to be very old, while he is still not that old. I have paid her to keep away from me. He used to pay her money in order not to come for him. These 5 years I have paid her. I have gotten decent about me again. I have lived hard and sad, but not ashamed and fearful at the minutes of my life. So now why we are experiencing such a kind of description, why we read this. The writer here actually tries to show how bad is the life Stephen having or living. It is a bad life on many levels. The first level is the effect of the Industrial Revolution, and as a worker, as a poor person, he spends too much time working at the factories, and he receives very little wages, because we understand that he is poor from the way he is, the way he lives, and the setting where he lives, as we read in the previous lecture. The description of his room is very simple. It's one room with little furniture and some books, that's all. So his life is very simple, and the other problem that he is experiencing is his marriage to this wife. The life he has with this wife is very troublesome, is very problematic. So the writer tries to push his readers to sympathize with this character. So I was acquainted with all that, said Bounderby, except the last clause long ago. It's a bad job. You had better have been satisfied. Now you see, Bounderby is not satisfied and does not sympathize with Stephen. You have been satisfied as you were, and not have got married. So he is asking him, you should have been satisfied and did not get married. However, it's too late to say that. Well, why don't you go on? An advice by Mr. Bounderby. Why don't you continue with the life you have? And in spite of the description of the suffering of his life with her, now he is asking him, why don't you go on? He then asked, turning rather irritably on Stephen Blackpool. I have come to ask you, sir, how I am to be ridden, how to get rid of this woman, Stephen asked. And then Mrs. Sparsit interferes. Actually, Mrs. Bounderby, what are you talking about? You took her for better, for worse. In the marriage, you understand. If you have come across this, married her for better and for worse, for good and for bad. I must be ridden of her. I cannot bear it anymore. I have lived under it so long for that I have had not the pity and comforting words on the best last living or dead. Happily, but for her, I should have gone battering mad. Yani, this situation with her is driving him crazy. Then Bounderby and Disparsit, when they don't agree, they start, let's say, convincing Stephen to live with her and by taking another room. When they don't, spouses, man and women, wife and husband, when they do not agree for that, their tempers is ill-sorted, they has rooms of one kind another in their house above a bit, and they can live asunder, away from each other. We folk, look here, he says we folk, he mentions this to mean that we the poor, the lower class people, have only one room. We are not that luxurious, we do not have much money, we are not rich to have a big house with so many rooms and bathrooms. We have only one room and we cannot live apart. So I must be ridden of this woman, and I want to know how. Know how, returned Bounderby. If I do her any hurt, said, there is a law to punish me. This is a kind of expressive conversation between Stephen and Bounderby. He says, if I do her any hurt, if I hurt her, there is a law to punish me. Of course there is. If I flee from her, there is a law to punish me. If I marry the other dear lass, the other woman I love, there is a law to punish me. If I was to live with her and not marry her, the other lady, the one he loves, whom we understand as Rachel here, saying such a thing could be, which it never could or would, and her so good, there is a law to punish me. Of course there is. So now, in God's name, said Stephen, show me the law to help me. Give me a law that could help me. All the laws here are against Stephen, and they do not help him. There is a sanctity, حرمة أو قدسية, in this relation of life, the marriage life, the matrimonial life, said Bounderby, and it must be kept up. يجب الحفاظ عليها. No, don't say that, sir. It ain't kept up that way. بهاي الطريقة ما نحافظ عليه. Not that way. It's kept down that way. بهاي الطريقة we are wasting it. So Stephen kept asking how to get unchained, how to get rid of this lady, how to break this kind of relationship. He was seeking help, but his Bounderby started mocking him, and then he said, there is a law, there could be a law, it's not for you at all. There is a law, there is such a law, but it's not for you at all. It costs money. A law that serves the rich people only. It costs a mint of money. How much might it be? Stephen calmly asked. Why, you would have to go to doctors, common, with a suit. You need a suit, because they don't have a suit. Badla. And you have to go to the court of common law with a suit. للمحكمة. And you would have to go to the House of Lords, للبرلمان, أو البيت اللوردات, with a suit, and you would have to get an act of parliament. تحتاج تشريع من البرلمان to enable you to marry again, and it would cost you. So the cost might be 1,000 to 1,500, من 1000 إلى 1,500 pound at his own time, while he used to receive some pences for his day, less than half a pound maybe or less as a wage. So there is, it's a kind of impossible situation for Stephen to pay for this. So he said his famous sentence, it's a muddle, it's just a muddle together, and the sooner I am dead, the better. He is foreshadowing his death because he cannot live this life. And here, you see, don't you call the institutions of your country a muddle. Bounderby, instead of sympathizing with him, comforting him, he is defending the institutions of the country. there's kind of ironic situation. We understand that Dickens here is attacking attacking these institutions, because instead of protecting the people and helping them live a better life, they are attacking them and pushing them to suffer. You didn't take your wife for fast and for loose, but for better, for worse. If she has turned out worse, why, all we have got to say is she might have turned out better. So here he tries to show him that he needs to keep up with his wife and continue the way he lives. And then the scene comes to an end, and Stephen thanks Bounderby and leaves without achieving anything. This chapter is important in many ways. It keeps highlighting the negative effect of the Industrial Revolution and how it is portrayed in the second paragraph of the chapter. It also uncovers the issue of Stephen through the meeting with Bounderby. We understand that he is living a bad life with his wife and he wants to get rid of this wife. So he is looking for some means, because Bounderby is a businessman, rich, and he understands and knows so many means that could help Stephen. His marriage issue is uncovered. We understand this, every particular detail about his marriage. And we understand that the writer is attacking the divorce law, and because this law is keeping people suffering, and they should live with their bad wives without getting divorced. It's noteworthy to mention that Dickens attacked the divorce law in his novel and in his own essays, in his own other critical essays of the society. And 2 years after this novel was published, the Parliament managed to create an act, a decree, a kind of law that enabled people to get divorced, but under certain circumstances, which came later after the criticism of these novels. So these are the main points that the chapter highlights and uncovers. It is actually linked to the previous chapter, and later we will come to chapter 12. Thank you, and